Hello, I'm Michael Topham and welcome to this month's second masterclass video that's looking closely at the very useful shadow highlight command. In the first video we studied the basic shadow highlight dialog and witnessed how easy it can be to rescue an image. Now it's time to move on one step further and take control of the other options in the shadow highlight advanced dialog. We very briefly looked at the advanced dialog in the first video and we'll be using it a lot more in this video with the start image dereliction.jpg. Loading this image into Photoshop, it's clear to see that we're dealing with an underexposed image that's drastically in need of bringing back to life, especially in the shadows. Before we start working in the shadow highlight dialog, it's vital that we create a new layer to work on, and I'm very simply going to create a new layer via copy by hitting Ctrl and J on the keyboard. Whenever we create new layers, it's always a good idea to rename them, so I'm going to go into my layers palette, double click where it says layer 1 and rename this layer shadow highlight. Unfortunately, in Photoshop there's no keyboard shortcut for the shadow highlight command, so whenever we want to load it, we have to go up to image in the menu bar, go down to adjustments and then scroll down and click on shadows highlights. To look at the original image without any shadow or highlight adjustment, I'm going to take hold of the shadows amount slider and drag this over to the left and set it to 0%. In the first masterclass video, we looked at how both the shadow amount and highlight amount sliders can be used for quick edit adjustments. But when you want the finest amount of control, you'll want to move down and tick the Show More Options box to reveal the full set of 8 sliders. The shadow and highlight amount sliders let us achieve the desired amount of shadow and highlight correction in our images. If you want to reveal quite a lot of detail in the shadowed areas, the shadow amount needs to be set quite high, and the slider can be dragged over to the right to increase the percentage. Now there's quite a lot of shadow detail in this dereliction.jpg image that we're looking to preserve, so I'm going to take hold of the slider, drag this over to the right and set it to 80%. The next slider down is tonal width. This can also be set anywhere between 0 and 100% like the amount slider, and it enables us to control the range of tones in the shadow or highlight areas that are modified. Taking hold of the slider and dragging it over to the left narrows the amount adjustment setting to the darkest pixels in the image, and dragging it over to the right intensifies the effect in the midtones. It's worth noting that if the amount slider is set to 0, the tonal width setting will not have any effect on your image. On this example, I'm going to control the tones in the shadows by going for a slightly lower tonal width of around 40%. Below the tonal width is the radius slider. It's not controlled in percentage terms like the amount and tonal width sliders, and instead it can be set anywhere between 0 and 2500 pixels. The radius slider basically governs how broad the shadow or highlight effect is in the image, and you'll usually find if the radius is set too low, you'll end up with a very flat looking image. Because the shadow highlight command is so image dependent, you'll usually need to take hold of the radius slider and drag it left or drag it right to find the optimum setting. And on this example, I'm going to increase the radius from its 30 pixel default setting to 55 pixels. So now that we've experimented with the amount, tonal width and radius sliders for the shadows, we can do the same for the highlights. Increasing the amount from 0 to 50% introduces a little bit more detail in the highlights, and dragging the tonal width slider from left to right shows that the best range of tones in the highlights are found at 50%. Taking hold of the radius slider reveals a slight halo around the top of this derelict building when it's set to around 100 pixels. So I'm going to drag this slider as far as it can go over to the right and settle for a maximum 2500 pixel radius. The other two interesting sliders that we can control are the color correction and midtone contrast. The color correction slider lets us fine-tune the colors of the areas in the image that have been adjusted, but the one that we're going to concentrate on for now is the midtone contrast. This does exactly what it says. It lets us increase the contrast in the midtones only. We can enhance the midtones by dragging this slider over to the right, and I'm going to settle for a value of +80, and then I'm going to move back up to the color correction slider to adjust the color. Dragging this over to the left lowers the saturation quite significantly, and pushing it over to the right enhances the saturation, but I'm going to settle for a value of +15. To see the huge difference between the original image and the adjustments we've made in the shadow highlight command, we can go up and untick the preview and then tick it again. To apply our adjustments, we can go up and hit OK. One of the great things about the shadow highlight command is that it can be used with selections, as we're now going to see. Hit Ctrl and J to create another new layer in your layers palette, but we want to rename that layer, so just double click on it and give it the new name Foreground Contrast. Move across into the toolbox and pick out the lasso tool, and we're going to use the lasso tool just to make a selection around this foreground area. So just very carefully just draw around and make sure that you don't include the derelict building in your selection, and then just join up the selection so you can see the marching ants. We need to feather the selection so our shadow highlight adjustment will blend in beautifully and seamlessly into the non-selected area above. Go up to Select in the menu bar, go down and click on Refine Edge. Set your feather to 100 pixels and then go up and hit OK. We can now move up to Image, go down to Adjustments and then scroll down and click on Shadow Highlights. In the Advanced dialog, return the Shadow and Highlight sliders to 0. So just take hold of all of these and return them to 0 in both the shadows and the highlights. And the one slider that we want to concentrate on is the mid-tone contrast. Keep the color correction set at +20 and then increase the mid-tone contrast to +40. You should be able to see that there's a bit more contrast in the foreground, and you can see the difference by using the preview again. There we go, we've got a little bit more contrast in the foreground now, so to apply it to that selection, we hit OK. To reveal a bit more detail around the windowsills and inside this derelict building, we can use the shadow highlight command once again. Inverse the selection on your screen by going up to Select and then going down to Inverse, and then we need to make another layer via Copy by hitting Ctrl and J. Move into the Layers palette and double click where it says Layer 1 to rename this layer. Give it the new name Building Detail, hit Enter, and then move up into the menu bar, click on Image, go down to Adjustments, and then go down and click on Shadows Highlights. To pull out more shadow detail in this derelict building, take hold of the Shadows Amount slider and drag this over to the right and set it to 90%. Move down to the tonal width, keep that set at 50%, and the radius should be set to 25 pixels. Now we're not worried about adjusting the highlights, so we can go down to the highlights and just return all these sliders back to 0. But moving down, we can improve the mid-tone contrast a little by increasing this to +60. To apply these shadow highlight settings, go up and hit OK. A lot more building detail is now visible in our image. However, the latest shadow highlight adjustment that we've just made has lightened the sky. So let's paint back the sky detail with a layer mask. Move down into the Layers palette and go down and click on the Add Layer Mask icon, and that will bolt a layer mask alongside your building detail layer. Move over into the toolbox and pick out the brush tool before heading up into the options bar and setting the brush to 700 pixels with an opacity set to 80%. You also want to make sure that your foreground color is set to black, and then you can just brush over the sky and you'll just be able to return some of that cloud detail. Just take your time, just brush over very carefully, and you may want to zoom in if you want to do a slightly neater job. And there we go, we're just brushing back those sky tones, those sky darker tones, and that's looking a lot better. If you want to disable your layer mask and see the difference between before and after, hold down the Shift key, click on your layer mask in the Layers palette, and that will put a big red cross through it. Click on it again whilst holding the Shift key, and you can see there that we've just returned that extra little bit of detail in the sky area. To finish off and make this dereliction image stand out, we're going to make the sky even more dramatic with the use of a Levels Adjustment layer. Go into the Layers palette and check that you're selected on your building detail layer thumbnail, and then go into the toolbox and pick out the Lasso tool. Draw out a selection across the sky and keep it in line with the top of the building. Now just work your way along the top of the building like I am, and then join up your selection until you see the marching ants. When you've got a similar selection that looks a little bit like mine, you can go up to Select in the menu bar, go down and click on Refine Edge. we want to feather the selection by around 100 pixels. So under the feather, check you've got 100 pixels set, go up and then hit OK. To make our levels adjustment layer, we go up to Layer, move down to New Adjustment Layer and then go across and click on Levels. Now I'm just going to move this over to the right so we can see the adjustments that we're making on our image, and we want to take hold of the Shadows slider over on the left and drag this over to the right, and you'll be able to see that as you do so the sky is getting even more dramatic, and you want to drag that shadow slider in to the base of the mountain. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop than I am, you'll need to confirm the adjustment by hitting OK, but in CS4 you can simply close down the adjustment by using the small close button at the top right. The last thing that we can do is just brush back a little bit of detail at the top of this derelict building with the brush tool in our layer mask. So go across into the toolbox, pick out the brush tool, set up a soft 125 pixel brush with an opacity set to 80% and check your foreground colour is still set to black. Zoom into the image by hitting Ctrl and plus a couple of times and move through the image with the hand tool. You can then just use this brush to paint back into the layer mask and return a little bit of detail at the top of the derelict building, and that's starting to look a lot better with just a few brush strokes. We can now zoom out by hitting Ctrl and minus. With the hard work completed, it's time to sit back and take a look at the work that you've carried out with this shadow highlight command. Don't forget to save your image by going up to File and down to Save As, and it's a good idea to save it as a PSD, which will mean that we can return to it and make any adjustments to those layers that we've created in the future. I'm going to give my image the new name Dereliction Enhanced. To save it, just move across and click on Save. Just before we finish, let's take one last look at how we've improved this image by turning off the layers in the Layers palette. This is the original image that we started with, and after a bit of hard work, we've transformed it into this stunning derelict image. I hope this video has given you some inspiration to try out Photoshop's valuable shadow highlight command for yourself on some of your own images. I'll see you again soon in another video lesson, and thanks for watching. Bye for now.